guys, this is Phil the MMA Dude, here with my brand new podcast, the Split Decision Podcast, with my co-host, the Fight Geek. Couldn't be more excited for this. This has been a long time in the making, and knock on wood, hopefully we finally are able to get our first episode out. What's going on, Fight Geek? How are you today?
Doing excellent, man. Happy to be here. Happy to get this podcast off the ground, and just checking out what's on Twitter, getting ready for these upcoming cards. Interested in UFC Lincoln. The main event intrigues me. Gaethje versus Vic, a lot of different angles to come at there. There's been a pretty interesting discussion on Twitter today on my page. So let's open it up with that. Got any thoughts on UFC Lincoln main event, Gaethje versus Vic?
I am very glad that you asked, my friend, because I believe that me and you may disagree a little bit on this. So I noticed your post earlier. There was heated discussion. A lot of people going back and forth. I was surprised, to be honest, with how many people like Justin Gaethje in this fight. You know, I prefer Gaethje as a fighter, just stylistically. I would argue that I'm sure most people do, right? He's exciting. He comes forward with constant pressure. But I won't lie, I've got Vic winning this one by TKO in the second or third round. I just think that he's going to be able to pick apart Justin from distance. He's obviously got, a huge size and reach advantage. And Justin, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I thought Justin just did not sound good during that presser about a week ago when they were going back and forth. I mean, I hate to say, Justin almost sounded a little concussed. Did you notice that? Am I being crazy here?
It's funny that you mentioned that, but go back to the beginning of your statement. I find it funny that you thought that more people were leaning towards Gaethje, because I actually thought that I read more people than I thought were leaning towards Vic. Obviously, Vic has the measurable advantages.
Yep.
But in terms of, fighting spirit and will, I think that Gaethje has shown that he's been to much deeper waters than James Vick has to this point in his career. Not discounting anything James Vick has done, but on a surface level. I don't know if he's been to the deep waters that Justin Gaethje routinely goes to. Now, the wear and tear on Gaethje is the obvious issue,
Right.
He didn't sound great in that press conference. I don't want to, call anybody anything or
and I'm no doctor. I'm not saying he's concussed.
But yeah, he definitely sounds like he's been wearing the damage over the last year or two, so he's definitely susceptible. But in my opinion, he's a march forward, blood and guts type fighter. I have not seen James Vick in that type of fight yet. He's been he does like to keep his distance. He likes to counter strike. He likes to use his length, which are all great traits. But if Gaethje is able to eat up that lead leg, and if he's able to close that distance, and if he's able to wear on him a little bit and slow him down, and he's not able to move around, then I think the tables turn pretty heavily in Gaethje's favor, just based on my earlier statements about his will and his fighting spirit, because that guy's going to go until he's not. We haven't seen Mike Vick, sorry, Vic the fighter go into that deep of waters. So that's kind of the way I've been leaning on that.
I agree 100%. One thing that you just said that jumped out at me is that, I don't know if Vic has been in as deep of waters as Justin, and I can tell you, 100% I can answer that James has not been in those deep waters. I think that I would argue that's not even up for debate, right? I mean, James is the greener fighter,
Agreed.
Especially in terms of big pressure fights. There's no doubt about it.
And facing top end talent. Justin Gaethje has lost
absolutely
his last two fights to two of the best fighters in the best division in the world.
There's no doubt.
He was beating those guys up in certain parts of those fights, and both of those guys left those fights with W's, but they also left beat up.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Here's why I still like Vic in this fight, Fight Geek, and this is what I've come to learn over the few or at least think I've learned, right? As we all know in MMA, you think you've learned something until you're proven wrong, which is every other week, and then
Right.
everything changes and is put on its head. But it's no surprise to most people listening that I'm a big Eddie Alvarez fan, and I was extremely impressed with Dustin Poirier's absolute destruction of him. But I do see a lot of relevancy between that fight and this upcoming Gaethje Vick fight, and this is why Gaethje has taken a lot of punishment, especially in the UFC, even against Johnson. I rewatched the Johnson fight a few days ago, and Gaethje was on ice skates for a while.
Agreed.
I think that and you mentioned this, just a minute or two ago, but there's wear and tear issues, and as we said again, I am no doctor. I am not speculating on Justin's health at all. But he didn't sound totally fine at that press conference. I'm sorry, it was hard to ignore, and I just think he's taken a lot of damage. And I think that Vic is really going to exploit that because he's the fresher fighter. He doesn't stand in the pocket and just get tagged. But I know that you disagree. I know you've got Gaethje. So I said Vic by stoppage, second or third round. How do you see Gaethje winning this? And break it down for me, stylistically and in what round?
Well, stylistically, I think it's pretty clear. It's going to be accumulation strikes,
leg kicks,
yep. Forward pressure, cardio, the strength that Gaethje does have. So I think that's how he gets it done. I think he comes forward. I think he eats up that front leg. I think he eliminates some of the side-to-side movement of Vic. And then once he can close the distance, he's a guy who lands devastating knees and can finish you. We've seen Vic knocked out cold, have we not?
We have.
Off the top of my head. Even though Gaethje took tons of damage in the last few fights, he was not knocked out cold. He was TKO'd in both of those. I know these are technicalities.
And that was one fight in his defense. That was UFC 199 against Dariush. Not a great loss, but that was one.
But knocked out is knocked out, and TKO'd is TKO'd. They're
Absolutely.
two different things.
Absolutely.
So I lean on those technicalities sometimes, and whenever there's super fine lines that we're trying to split, those are the things I lean on. I'm a guy who kind of goes with my gut on some of these picks. I don't always go exactly by the statistics, and I kind of romanticize about things like fighting spirit and will, stuff like that. So, yeah, that's kind of how I see it going down.
All right, fair enough. I'm looking at the card. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the fight before we move on? I'm looking at the card right now. Not a whole lot on UFC Lincoln. Frankly, the fights that jump out to me is the co-main event. Michael Johnson, of course, he has now gone down to featherweight, and he's facing maybe my favorite combination of nickname and last name in the sport, Touchy Feely. Just love it. So weird, so random. So fucking creepy, but
right?
Yeah, I mean Johnson versus Touchy Feely on that co-main. We've got Angela Hill coming back. Who cares?
So before we move on, which way are you leaning on Johnson versus Feely?
Yeah,
give me a little breakdown.
All right. So to me, this isn't that hard of a fight. I got Johnson is to me. Actually, one of the more underrated fighters in the UFC. I think he gets
he's an enigma.
He's an enigma. Such a good way to put it. He's an enigma, right? Because he's so talented, especially his striking. And you just would have thought that he would have gone further. But he it seems like he's almost like I hate to bring in basketball, he's almost like a Carmelo Anthony type. It's like so talented, but just wrong place, wrong time, all the time, and he can never get any momentum. I actually feel a little bad for the guy, but anyways, to get to answering your question, I see Johnson winning this in a third round knockout, and I would be surprised if it goes to a decision, but if it is, it's going to be an easy unanimous decision for Michael Johnson.
That's very interesting. So I'll give you my thoughts on it. I'm leaning Johnson as well, and I'm leaning Johnson by stoppage. But just side note, Touchy-Feely has looked much improved in his last 3 fights at least.
Oh, yeah.
Coming of age, getting some strength, rounding his skills. He's definitely a threat to Johnson in that fight. It's definitely a pick'em fight with different trajectories. But, yes, I would lean to Johnson. He has extremely fast hands. He packs a little more of a punch coming down a weight class, and Feely has a propensity to get hit. So I'd lean that way, probably second round TKO.
And who was it that that Feely just beat? Was it Lobov? Is that right?
Yes, I think he did. He kind of outclassed Lobov a little bit.
Yes. I remember that. It was it was an impressive win. Okay, so that was Fight Night. Cerrone Till. And then his last win was over Dennis Bermudez in a split decision in January of this year. The Artem fight was
solid name for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a decent fight. And then the last one that I was going to bring up that jumps out on this card is the return of Mickey Gall.
Absolutely. Let's talk about it.
Yep. So
what do you think?
Well, Mickey Gall is okay. It's ironic that we were just talking about Michael Johnson, because talk about an enigma, right?
Right.
I mean, to me, Gall might be a bigger enigma than Johnson is. Mickey Gall has. He seemingly has it all. He's got, we all know, his ground game, right? He's certainly got the submission game. He's got a 100% submission finish record. He's 4-1, but he did have that bad loss, a couple of months ago, or it was actually a while ago, if I recall. I know he hasn't fought in nearly a year. So I think it's a tough one. I'm looking right now at his record, and he did have that Randy Brown loss.
His last fight was against Randy Brown, who's a very tricky fighter. He lost the decision there.
Yeah,
but the
kind of a bad loss. Kind of a bad loss. No,
I disagree with you on the Mickey Gall as an enigma point. Is that he's so young. The difference between him and Michael Johnson is Michael Johnson is, off the top of my head, 14 to 18. Maybe 20 fights into his UFC career, whereas Mickey Gall is a guy who's 4 fights into his UFC career and is just now expanding outside of his local region to start training. From what I've understand, he's training down in California with Joe Schilling and, in and out of different places down there against probably the best training partners he's ever had. No disrespect anywhere he's ever been. But this is the time from here on forward we're going to see the best of Mickey Gall. So let's say maybe 2 or 3 years from now he doesn't pan out. Then perhaps he is an enigma. But right now I still see him as one of the top prospects in the UFC personally.
Very fair. Just playing devil's advocate on that, on saying, he's very young, give him time. He is 26, which you're right. That is not old. But I would say, wasn't Whitaker champion by 26? I think Whitaker might even be 26, if not 27.
Yeah, he's in that range. Well, think about someone like Dustin Poirier, where he was at 26, and now where he is at 29.
Very good point.
There's 3 years difference,
yep.
And there's a huge difference in skill, development, physical development, and just overall fight IQ. So yep. I would say there's still plenty of time there, where, again, going back to Johnson, I think he's over 30 and yada yada.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's a great point. Okay, so is that everything?
Let me take one more look at it and see. But there was something else on here that kind of interests me. Let's see.
I don't know much about George Sullivan, Gall's opponent, 17-6, the silencer.
He's got a lot of experience. He's a big, strong guy, so. When you're a young guy dealing with a big, stronger vet, there's always going to be that strength and experience issue he's gonna come up against. I'm always kind of interested in seeing how Warley Alves does, and he's fighting James Krause. I think that's the FS2 prelims headliner. This is a good fight. Both of these guys have shown lots of potential in the past. James Krause is 23-8. I mean, he's a veteran of the game, but he feels like a young veteran. He's shown a decent level of potential, but I don't think we've seen the best of him yet in the UFC. And then with Warley Alves, I mean, I think we've seen elite potential at times from him, and then some inconsistent performances in between. So this one is really interesting to me. I would lean towards Alves. I think he's a little more violent. I think he's a little more sudden. I think he's a little bit more of a finisher, and potentially he may have better cardio. So that's one I'd go with.
Interesting. I'll be honest. I don't know a ton about Warley Alves. By the way, if you guys are wondering why the Fight Geek is my co-host for Split Decision, now you know. He literally is able to break down Warley Alves and James Krause fights on the FS2 prelims of UFC Lincoln in the blink of an eye without me telling him beforehand. So this guy is quite literally the Fight Geek. So mad respect to you, man.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, of course. So. I did take a look at this fight. Didn't take a long look at it. Again, I won't pretend to know a whole lot about Warley Alves. What a interesting name. His parents either loved him or despised him. That's all I know. They either it's not a middle child, that's for sure. But I like Krause in this. I do like Krause. I think Krause is gritty. I remember him obviously from The Ultimate Fighter, and I think he's a little underrated. I know he's had he's certainly taken some losses in the UFC, but like you said, we've yet to kind of see the best of him. So give me Krause in this fight.
Nice.
Yeah. So let's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, that about wraps it up for UFC Lincoln for me.
Exactly.
Quick, I'm on Twitter right now just checking out some interesting stuff going on. It seems that Al Iaquinta has a pseudo call-out of Tony Ferguson for his return fight. You got any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. I've got 4 words for you on that. I am not impressed. Of course, Al would love to fight Tony. I'm sure he would, and he'd love to fight, Khabib again. And I don't know about that, but he'd love to fight Conor, and he'd love all the top contenders. But what's really unfortunate is, I'm still so angry, frankly, at Al for pulling out of the Gaethje fight. Not just pulling out of it, but the way he did it, where he pulled out of the fight after promoting it. Then he's talking shit to Gaethje afterwards, saying you're going to be brain dead in a few years, after pulling out of the fight. I just thought it was a horrendous look, and I don't think he deserves Tony Ferguson. Do you? I mean, do you honestly think he deserves that fight?
Well, that word deserves, again, keeps coming up. I don't think the UFC cares about what anyone deserves. I think they care about what the biggest fights they could make.
Well, sure, but is Al that big of a draw?
Obviously, Al is not a top 3 or 4 guy in the division currently, so no, he wouldn't warrant a fight with probably, unarguably, the true number 1 contender in that division, if not the uncrowned champ, Tony Ferguson. So,
right.
But Ferguson's going to have to come back and fight somebody.
He is.
And in my opinion, and I feel pretty strongly about this, and I'm sure someone like Tony Ferguson sees it completely different than I, but I wouldn't want my true title shot to come on the heels of a pretty hardcore surgery that his recovery has been incredibly fast from. You see what I'm saying? I'd like him to test that. I'd like him to get some ring time. And then, if he goes through a guy like Al Iaquinta, that's more than a warm-up. That's more than a test. That's a real fight. And he gets through that, he's undeniably the number 1 guy. And this is all, just a side effect of the matchmaking that's already been made with Diaz versus Poirier and Conor versus Khabib and et cetera, et cetera. I'm also assuming that Kevin Lee and Anthony Pettis fight. I've heard that rumored. I think
Pettis won't take that. Pettis is not taking. There is no way in hell Pettis takes that fight. He knows exactly what will happen. He's not taking that fight.
Yeah, but he also saw Barboza hit him with that spinning back kick and wobble him, and I think that a lot of people overrate Lee's hand. Personally,
overrate Kevin Lee. Them's fighting words, Fight Geek.
Nah, I know. I'm sorry. I try not
I
to do
love
that kind
Kevin
of
Lee.
thing.
Come on, don't go after my
He's a
boy. He's a Motown
he's
phenom. Come on, why you got to do me like
he's
that?
he's a wrestler. His hands are coming. His hands are coming along.
Yep.
But there's a lot of guys in that 155 division who have well-developed hands and legs and Muay Thai skills and striking abilities and footwork, and he is not at the top of that list. Anthony Pettis is a lot closer to the top of that list than Kevin Lee. Therefore, I think a guy like Anthony Pettis, who has never turned down difficult fights, probably to his detriment, he's taken too many tough fights. But I think that Anthony Pettis would take that fight, especially on the heels of a win and with the chance to grab Kevin Lee's momentum. And
Yeah.
I think he probably fancies his chances a little better than Edson Barboza. And then he did see that opening, the striking opening that almost finished Kevin. I mean, it was for a split second, but for that split second, he was in a lot of trouble. So that's still an issue for him, in my opinion. Not saying I favor Pettis in that fight, just playing devil's advocate, like you said, and giving you a reason why that fight could happen.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, I think that it'll be interesting to see if Pettis takes the fight. I will say this, my respect, you know, regardless of what happens in that fight, if Pettis does take the fight, if you're right and Pettis takes that fight, my respect for Pettis is going to go through the roof. I mean, it's going to really, really, I mean, I obviously, you know, he's an ex-champ. I already have a ton of respect for him, but I just don't see him taking the fight, if I'm being honest. But if he does, bring it on. I think it sounds fun. I don't see Lee. It's hard to see Lee losing that fight. Like you said, he could get caught with a nasty head kick that would rock him. But I don't know. I just see him mauling. I think he's going to take Pettis down and just kind of ground and pound him. That's what my guess would be. What do you if that fight, assuming that fight is made, Pettis versus Lee? How do you see that playing out?
I would tend to agree with you there. I think that Lee is the younger, superior athlete, obviously has the great wrestling ability, and is showing improvement all the time. So I would say that I would favor Lee in that fight, probably by, decision with controlling Pettis, ground and pound, stuff like that. Yeah. So, yeah, I lean that way with you.
Okay. Well, in any case, let's move on to, and I know you're stoked about this fight because it was all over your Twitter either today or yesterday, but Bellator 206, obviously we're going to get to that super fight on the card, right? That's Rory and Gegard's card, but fascinating fight was made on that card as well, and that is Aaron Pico, the young up-and-comer, versus former title challenger Leandro Higo. So I'm going to give you the reins here. Why don't you start this off and break down how you see that going down?
First of all, just the matchmaking is kind of attention-grabbing for me. You know,
Yep.
You're getting a guy who has 5 times the experience and title challenging experience versus Pico. So immediately that just catches my attention. And it's like, wow, this kid really wants to fight. And it's very impressive, to be honest, and up front.
Aaron Pico's the real deal.
I do see Leandro Higo potentially posing some issues that he hasn't seen yet with his quickness and his diverse striking. He's obviously the best fighter that Aaron Pico has faced thus far, in my opinion.
Oh, by far. Oh, I don't think that's even up for debate. By far.
Right. So, and I think Aaron Pico, to this point, has shown such exponential growth that we really think we're looking at, MMA's version of like a LeBron James type prospect or something on that level, regardless of the loss. And even if you were to lose to Leandro Higo, I don't think that stunts his growth. He's such a young guy, and you think about where a lot of the current champions in the world right now in any organization, where they were when they were his age now. I mean, he's so far ahead of the curve in skill and just, demeanor, professionalism, and his last 3 performances have been pretty much jaw-dropping, spectacular.
He was born in 96. Fight Geek, I remember 1996. I remember that. Do you know how sad that is? Yeah. I feel so old.
Insane.
It's
insane. It's insane. So, I would lean, at this point, I would still lean Pico, even with his inexperience, because I believe, and I'll quote Jim Harbaugh on this, in plutonium-grade goods, which is what I believe Aaron Pico to be, plutonium-grade goods. He's as good as an MMA prospect as we have ever seen. So I'm gonna roll with that. And how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I hate that we keep agreeing. We usually disagree, folks, I promise. And we get into very heated but petty debates where we engage in personal attacks. No, I'm kind of kidding. But I'm going to agree with you again. I got Pico in this, but it's not going to be easy. And I will certainly, I'll put this out there. So, obviously, Pico's first fight against Zach Freeman, that was at lightweight. He lost in the first round by, guillotine choke submission. And then he switched to featherweight. And then since then, his next 3 fights, as you said, they've all been highlight reels. And they've all been KOs or TKOs within the first round. Pico is a knockout artist in the truest form. But I think what impresses me the most about Aaron is that, he lost that first fight and he was such a hot prospect. Even before that fight, I remember I just kept hearing his name over and over and over from Daniel Cormier and Chael Sonnen and Scott Coker. Everyone was talking about him leading up to the Zach Freeman fight at Bellator 180, and he lost in the first round. And it would have just, it would have been so easy to crumble mentally right then and there. It would have been, especially for such a young man, it would have been so easy to do that. And how has he responded to that adversity, to that 0-1 start, with 3 TKO or KO first-round performances? So,
literally as good as it can be.
Right. And that's the kind of X factor that I look for. I didn't finish my thought before I said I'll go out on this. I'll go out on a limb here. And what I was going to say is I do not think that this is going to end in the first round. I simply don't. I
don't believe so either.
Yeah,
no way.
I don't think so. I think that this is going to be. I'll be impressed, frankly, if Pico finishes him. I see a Pico decision win. Or a third round knockout, but my gut would actually say his first decision win.
Well, let me play devil's advocate with you then. He's never been to the third round. If he were to go to the third round with a former title challenger, would you still be favoring him in that fight?
Well, okay, great question. Do you mean do you say that from a physically fit standpoint or from a mental standpoint, like he's going to start to get nervous?
I would say I wouldn't even classify it as nervous. I would just classify it as Higo has 22 career fights, just experience. With more experience is going to come a little more fight IQ just over time and experience. It's just a natural thing. Yep. So if he's in the third round of a fight, in a grueling fight potentially, or a fight where he has taken some damage or his cardio is being tested, would you still favor Pico in a fight that's playing out in the third round, considering all of his success has been early first-round success?
Gotcha. Great question. Yeah, in short, the answer is I'm going to go – my gut would first, of course, say no. But I'm going to go against my gut, which I like to do with varying degrees of success. And I'm going to say yes, I still favor Aaron Pico in that. And again – that goes back to what I saw in his first 4 fights. There's nothing I love more than overcoming adversity. There's nothing I love more than watching someone go down, take some hard hits from the game of life, and just kind of just stick it, just stick it to everyone and just prove everyone wrong. And Aaron Pico has done nothing but prove everyone wrong since that first loss. And I think his confidence is sky high, and I don't see, as good as Higo is. As good as he is, I don't see him stopping the Pico train just yet. I think it'll take, frankly, a title fight, in my opinion, to stop Aaron Pico. I don't see him becoming champion right now, but I see him losing to champion. I see him losing to the champ.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't even want to think that far ahead.
Right, I'm getting ahead of myself, as I love to do, as you know.
So let me just pose one other statement while we're on Bellator 206, which in my opinion is the best card, early card. Stumbling over my words yet. The best card they've put together. in history, in my opinion. The top of the card
no doubt.
Gegard versus Rory. Then we get Rampage Juan 4. Then we have Lima Koreshkov. We also get the Pico Higo fight. I was also seeing that they released the prelims, which it looks like a lot of their newly acquired talent in the recent purchase of 24 European fighters. So that's pretty interesting as well. Really, really excited about Bellator moving forward, the zone moving forward, and kind of the way the MMA landscape is shifting. I'm excited to see where the end of 2018 goes and 2019 goes as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and we can get into the whole DAZN business decision on another podcast, because frankly we could talk about that for 2 hours on its own.
For sure.
But now that you brought up the two other big fights on 206, I can't resist. So you brought up Lima Koreshkov, part of that welterweight Grand Prix, which I'm so excited for, and as you know, I've got some strong feelings about. So let's save that one for last. But now I can't help but ask, you don't need to pick a winner if you don't want to. Just your thoughts on Rory versus Gegard at middleweight.
Thoughts, huh? Well, I love both fighters dearly, so that's the first thought. I think they're both amazing. I think they're both skill for skill, the best that MMA has to offer. I think it's dangerous for Rory to be moving up and fighting a guy in Gegard who has quite a bit of experience fighting larger men. So I think that Gegard is going to present a lot more problems for Rory than Rory is going to present to Gegard. Now, that being said,
interesting.
I think that Rory will have a distinct quickness advantage. I think that with his sharp jab and kind of the way he is with his front foot, and he's real quick in and out and he works, I think if he's super technical, that would be Rory's path to success. But based on Gegard dealing with larger opponents for the majority of his career and coupling that with the vast skill set that he has basically everywhere, you're not going to find a weakness in Gegard Mousasi's game. So because of those reasons, I would give the slightest of edges to Gegard Mousasi right now. But there's still there's still a little time to do some more research, but that's the way I lean right now.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. I didn't mean to put you on the spot with that pick, but hey, you brought up that sexy card in those two sexy fights, so I couldn't resist.
Right.
I'm gonna say this. I respectfully will definitely disagree with you on that pick. I've got Rory. And I don't think it's going to be an easy fight. I don't think it's going to be a fun fight for Rory. I think it's going to be long. I think it's going to be ugly. I think Rory's going to take a lot of damage, but what else is new, right? I mean, what else is new?
Right.
It's a Rory McDonald fight. And if there's one thing that that maybe has really helped push me towards the Rory side over the Gegard side, it's just watching their interactions leading up to the fight getting made, and then once the fight was made, granted they both said they wanted it, but you could just at least me playing armchair psychologist, and of course I'm I'm obviously not one, right? It just felt like Rory was truly not in the least bit scared, in fact, very anxious to fight Gegard, and Gegard seemed a little wary of it. And then I'd combine that, perhaps unfairly, excuse me, with Gegard's last UFC fight. I know that wasn't his last fight. I know he won the middleweight belt very easily in Bellator, but his last fight in the UFC against Chris Weidman. Weidman is of questionable level right now, and I think we can certainly agree that his striking is by no means, Weidman is many things, but he's not necessarily a power puncher, right? And obviously he caught Anderson Silva when Silva was mocking him, but I think it's telling that Weidman was able to put Gegard on his ass during their fight. He knocked him down at least once, possibly twice. Don't quote me on that, but I know it was at least once.
And you talking about with punches or with his wrestling?
Oh no. He knocked him down with a strike.
Right.
So
we're talking about different things though, because Chris Weidman there's always been
Is
like
larger.
loose rumors that he could move up to 205. So he's a bigger guy who cuts down to 185.
Yep.
So
Sure.
even if he's not known as a big, powerful puncher, he's a bigger guy than Rory, significantly bigger guy, probably 20 pounds at least. So that's where the difference would be there, in my opinion.
Yep. And I think that's a very fair point. And as you said, a lot can happen between now and then. Let's get on to the beginning of the welterweight Grand Prix, and we could address my feelings on it after this. But you mentioned Lima Koreshkov. So who do you have in that fight?
Well, it's really a pick 'em fight. Honestly,
it is.
It's almost impossible to pick against Lima in that matchup, in my opinion, just based on what we've seen. And then, recent Lima success, even in the Rory fight, again, Rory won that fight, but he walked out of there beat up at the hands of, Lima. So you're going to get beat up in that Lima fight, but there's just something about Koreshkov that kind of makes me think that he may be the next star just waiting to happen. He just needs the opponents and the platform, which he's going to have now in the welterweight tournament. So a guy who's 21-2, he's only got, I believe, his only 2 losses are to Askren and Lima.
So he's lost to Lima before, though. That's what I was going to bring up as my little trump card in my pocket there. He's lost to Lima by KO.
Yeah, I know. I watched that fight. I believe it was 4th round. It wasn't a devastating KO. He caught him and he got him, but, it was one of those grueling fights where anything could have happened, honestly, in my opinion. So, I could see that. I think that's going to be another grueling fight. I don't see either guy walking through either man.
It's an odd first rounder, isn't it? Can we agree on that? It's an odd first rounder?
I don't know why. Maybe just because of the other matchups, those two got forced together because we could go off on a tangent. They had to make Daly MVP.
They did.
I think to avoid 2 sleepers, they had to make Neiman Gracie and Ed Ruth in the first round.
Why'd they have to make that, though? Wait. I'll stop you right there. Why'd they have to make that?
Because I feel like if you split both of those guys and then they end up winning, you have 2 sleeper guys killing off all your big names. At least now.
Good point.
Ed Ruth and Neiman Gracie will kill one of each other off in the first round. Therefore, you're only going to have the one true sleeper.
Right.
And then you're going to keep more of your names, ideally.
Right.
I mean, how perfect would it be if Rory would have matched up with Ed Ruth in the second round? I mean,
and I see. And by the way, I see that happening.
I mean, basically, we got to wait and see how Rory comes out of that Mousasi fight. If he takes a ton of damage, we have no idea what'll happen in that first round matchup with Finch. What if he can't fight for 8 months and they have to get an alternate in that Finch fight, and then Rory gets moved on or something?
All right, and that.
So we have to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We'll have to see how that Mousasi fight plays out first, and this brings us to another point you've been harping on, which is why didn't Rory get a first round bye?
I was just gonna say.
So go ahead with that.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say, give me my my little 45-second rant here. So, look, I love the welterweight Grand Prix. I love what Bellator is doing with the Grand Prix. First heavyweight, now welterweight. I love it. I think that the one big mistake that they are making with these Grand Prix, though, is that they're just going a little too slow. Now, I understand why they need to obviously go to, a realistic pace. Obviously, these are, they've got to worry about injuries. They don't want people dropping out and being filled in with replacements. But what I just cannot wrap my head around for the life of me, Fight Geek, is why would they not give the champion a first round bye when he's going on to take on a super fight against the next highest weight class champ in Mousasi? I mean, my God, if that doesn't deserve a first round bye in a tournament, what does? I mean, come on.
Let me stop you right there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Counterpoint. If Rory McDonald beats Mousasi and then wins the welterweight tournament, is he the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, regardless of weight promotion?
That's a good question, and I think he.
How can you say no?
Because of Cormier.
Oh, come on.
Hey, Cormier's. What do you mean? Cormier's a champ in And he dominated, he's
Well,
defended his
at that
belt at light
point,
heavyweight.
if Rory were to beat Mousasi, he would be the champ of Bellator.
Correct.
Mousasi has an equally impressive career to Stipe Miocic, so those are equal opponents that you're taking a champ belt from. So, and then you go on to win the welterweight tournament, which is probably the most prestigious event Bellator's ever put on, with arguably their top end talent. So let's say he beats Mousasi, John Finch, Ed Ruth, and then fights, let's say, Lima in the championship again, and beats all 4 of those guys.
That's what I have, by the way, in my little bracket, just for the record.
Right, but that's coming on the heels of beating Lima and beating Daly. So he'll be on a 6-fight win streak with Bellator against basically all of their names. It'd be impressive. It'd be extremely impressive.
Oh, it'd be extremely impressive. I mean, to be clear, don't get me wrong. The only question would be whether he's number 1 or number 2 pound for pound. That'd be the only question.
Well, by the time this sequence would complete, Cormier would be retired next year, and then we could just say Rory was the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world potentially.
Good point.
Potentially, but we're getting a little fanboy on here. Let's get back on subject.
Okay, so let's bring it back. Okay, so is there anything else we wanted to talk about with the welterweight Grand Prix? Obviously, I already let out my spiel on how pissed I am that Rory doesn't get a first round bye. And last thing on that, the other, this isn't all about Rory when I'm saying this. It's really not. You've also screwed over a Bellator welterweight who could have had a chance to be inserted into the tournament and then had a chance to fight for the right to face Rory in the second round. Put someone against John Fitch. For example, look, man, Dylan Dennis. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? He gets killed? Cool.
Right. But that would have actually been a super intriguing matchup because Finch is going to go forward and try and wrestle you. Dennis is great off his back, so that probably would have been the most interesting matchup for Finch on the whole roster. Finch.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have zero. This is 100% speculation with zero evidence whatsoever. I had a weird feeling. Dylan didn't want it. Dylan didn't want it.
Is a 1-0 fighter who just got done beating a 2-4 fighter in his debut. He talked himself into certain conversations, but I don't think there was ever a realistic chance of him being involved in the welterweight tournament personally. But I may be wrong, but he's not in the tournament, so I think that speaks clearly to that.
Yes, exactly. I think that's well said. Okay, so moving on from that, I want to really quickly touch on UFC 230, just because of sort of the mystery surrounding it. I think it's a very unique card. I don't remember a card coming together quite like this in a while, and what I mean by that is I don't remember a card where they've essentially put together all of these amazing, sexy fights on paper. Specifically, it's mostly become a middleweight tournament card, which I love. I think there should be more, themed weight class cards. That's my personal opinion. I love that. And then obviously there's that amazing Nate Diaz Dustin Poirier fight as the co-main event. And let's start right there. Let's start right there with Diaz Poirier. First of all, as you know, Diaz has been talking a lot of crap on Twitter lately to TMZ, saying that he's going to fight if he wants to. Do you believe this stuff? I mean, I think it is complete and total show. I actually am surprised by how many people, frankly, believe that he's not going to show up. I mean, if there's a contract signed, he's showing up. He's not trying to lose money, and he will lose a lot of money if he breaches contract and doesn't show.
Well, I believe there's kind of two sides to that coin. I do believe this is classic Diaz posturing. This is just kind of par for the course with them. They like to create some turbulence. They like to create a little drama, create a little buzz, and it's always a little offbeat. That's kind of their style. So I don't put much credence into that. Yeah. But when it comes to the UFC, mismanaging Nate Diaz and how to deal with Nate Diaz, I mean, I cocould go on a tangent, but the reason he walked out of that press conference, in my opinion, is because they drag him in there for a press conference to promote a fight, and the first thing they do is put on a trailer for Conor and Khabib. I mean, how clueless could they be?
Well, is Nate a little? Is Nate a little baby? Surprise, surprise. Conor's a bigger deal than you. Wake up and smell the roses.
I get it, but at that point, you don't have a main event in New York. Why not promote Poirier, who's on an amazing streak, who is potentially the fighter of the year in 2018? Why not have that guy face Nate Diaz in a 5-round main event in Madison Square Garden, and then have a video trailer for them, since they're the guys actually there? How about that?
Well, they should, by the way. I am completely in the camp that should be the main event of 230. Right. Go ahead.
I think they should make that the main event. A 5-round main event between Poirier and Diaz makes all the sense in the world, and I think the co-main should be Stipe versus Blades. And I think you had your card.
Ooh, I love that. One thing I've noticed about MMA Twitter is that, God bless them, the two most loyal types of fans, and this surprised me actually, because as you know, I've only been on Twitter like hardcore for about maybe 6 months, and I'm surprised. The two most loyal fan bases by far are, number one, Mighty Mouse. Don't even, we don't need to go into that. I want to meet a woman who loves me like Mighty Mouse fans love Mighty Mouse. I mean, oh my gosh. But
right?
But that's I could go on a whole tangent there, and I won't. But then, that second fighter, who everyone loves, oh my God, I just totally lost my train of thought. Who's I talking about?
Poirier versus Diaz?
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. Is Diaz. I'm sorry. Everyone loves Diaz, and I'm shocked that they won't make it the main event. The UFC they just seem to have some kind of complex, some kind of fear about putting on main events that aren't title shots. But as we have seen with UFC 196 and UFC 202, which I believe are number 1 and number 2 highest pay-per-views, and it might be in the top 3 with UFC 205 somewhere in there. But the point is, 2 of the 3 largest pay-per-views of all time were non-title fights. I think we can put that aside.
It's asinine that they think we need 2 title fights or interim fights or this or that. Just give us the best fighters against the best fighters, and we'll watch and we'll buy. I promise.
Exactly.
We've been doing it. We're going to keep doing it. But, the UFC obviously thinks the consumer, and can be a whole other tangent, so I won't go too far. The UFC must think the consumer is this stupid. They just do, because they don't put the type of effort in that they should on that kind of stuff.
They really don't. Last thing, because I can't resist asking this extremely tough, borderline impossible question. So don't be mad at me for asking it. I certainly don't have an answer. Okay, gun to your head right now. We're going to end the podcast on this. Who do you think the UFC 230 main event is?
Who do I think is the 230? I think, from what I've been reading and kind of rumors, I think it's going to end up being Stipe versus Blades.
You think Stipe will take that fight?
Main event at Madison Square Garden? Yeah, I think the pay-per-view points will be worth it.
I hope you're right. I would love it. I would
like that fight as well, but I don't want to see you that's backwards, because they need the Diaz-Poirier as the 5-rounder, and they need the Blades as the Stipe as the 3-rounder. So they have it backwards in that situation. But we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think that kind of also plays into who do you want to win?
Who thinks Stipe versus Blades is going to go 5 rounds? I wouldn't lean that way. Both of those guys are big-time killers.
Yeah, who do you like in that? You know what? Who do you like in Blades Stipe? That is a fun fight.
It's a fantastic heavyweight fight. I would say I would still lean Stipe just because I think he's got the experience, the fight IQ, a little more well-rounded. But I do see Blades coming on. I think he's 27. I may be wrong, but he's fairly young. He's huge, and that
27. You're right. 27.
So him demolishing Alistair Overeem last fight was very eye-opening, and that was coming off the back of eating some heavy Mark Hunt shots and winning that fight. So Blades is a real player, in my opinion, at heavyweight, especially moving forward because he's probably got about 10 years of his prime left.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, look, I can't lie. I'm biased. He's from Naperville, Illinois. You know, shout out Chicago, shout out Naperville. I love it. But I also obviously, you know, I was present at UFC 225 in Chicago, and I watched him, you know, get that stoppage against Overeem with those elbows, and it was one of the most brutal elbow finishes I've ever seen. And I don't say that lightly, and I know that's saying a lot, but it looked like Overeem's face was caving in.
Yeah, I watched it on television, and it was one of the more gory finishes I've ever seen. I do believe blood was squirting out of his forehead.
Yes, it was.
And I think the ref allowed probably 3 to 4 extra elbows once the Reem was unconscious. So yeah, that was a brutal finish and one that showed you the potential damage that Curtis Blades can inflict. Very eye-opening.
Well, the ref was just, he was pulling a Mario Yamasaki. He was letting him be a warrior, right?
Yeah, but you can't be a warrior.
I'm just kidding. It's a bad joke. I'm just being an old person with old
right.
jokes.
I feel you. So, all right, man. Well, I think we pretty much exhausted it for the first episode. How do you feel about it?
I feel great about it. I feel great. You know, hopefully our listeners will feel the same. And you know, this would be a great time for me to tell the listeners, guys, you know, send us questions. We want to read them and talk about them on the podcast. You can either send them to at Phil the MMA Dude or the Fight Geek MMA. Excuse me, at the Fight Geek MMA at Twitter. Send it to either of us. We're going to have a page up for our podcast, the Split Decision Podcast. We actually already do. I'm just not confident enough to
I got that. Follow us on our Twitter page. It's at @split_podcast. You can find us there. We'll be on Apple or on iTunes, We'll also be on SoundCloud, the Split Decision Podcast, 4 words. So you guys check us out. This was episode 1. We'll be looking forward to seeing the MMA landscape shift over the next day or week, and then we'll be back for episode 2 with you guys.